Hi, this is Britta Lafont from BrittaLafont.com, and today we're talking about Elizabeth George's Putting on a Gentle and Quiet Spirit. We're talking about Lesson 17, and it's called Understanding the Mysteries of God. Now, I have to tell you, this is a bit of a misnomer, or the chapter is ill-named because, well, we'll get to that. A little bit of a teaser. Let me go ahead and read you the passage, and then we'll jump right in. So this is 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 18 through 22. For Christ also suffered once for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive by the Spirit, by whom also he went and preached to the spirits in prison, who formerly were disobedient, when once the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is, 8 souls, were saved through the water. There is also an antitype which now saves us, namely baptism, not the removal of the filth of the flesh, but the answer of a good conscience toward God through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who has gone into heaven and is at the right hand of God, angels and authorities and powers having been made subject to him. All right, she says, hold on to your seat. You are entering a heavy theology zone. And what I wanted to say about this is, she calls this understanding the mysteries of God. And what she tells us is, this is a mysterious Bible verse that has confounded theologians for ages. And it is one verse in the Bible that most theologians would agree is unknowable. It's hard to comprehend. Here's what she says. Her note is at the bottom of page 100. The meaning of these verses is not completely clear, and scholars and commentators have explained them in many different ways. Now, let me just jump in and say, the part that she's talking about is how Jesus went and preached to the spirits in prison, who formerly were disobedient when once the long-suffering of God waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was being prepared. So this is the section she's talking about. She says, many learned scholars and commentators interpret these verses to mean that Christ went to Hades, now Hades being a place of holding, kind of a holding place, before there was a heaven and a hell. Some theologians believe there was a Hades, which is not the same as hell. It's not a place of punishment, but a waiting place, until Jesus came and there was a resurrection and there was a heaven, and then that hell will be at the end of time, if that makes any sense. So, again, a lot of these things we don't understand. And she says, this would be interpreted to mean that Christ went to Hades to proclaim his victory to the fallen angels imprisoned there since Noah's day. That is 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4. She goes back to and says to see that. So she says refer to that. So what we're talking about here is something that she says is a mystery. It's unknowable. Well, what I think this points us to more and more is a lot of life is a mystery. And for us to think that we've got it all figured out, or that we're supposed to have it figured out, is it's a deception. This is what faith is. It's to accept the things that we don't completely understand, because the part that we do know God, we do know his character, we do know the gospel. The parts that we do understand and know, well, that gives us the faith to accept the parts that we don't understand and know. And so this is what she says is a fairly unknowable verse. Now, the interesting thing is Christians want to know, and modern day people want to know everything. We want to accept, we want to know everything so that we can accept it and explain it to somebody else. But Hebrews don't have that same sense. There is an understanding in Hebrew religion, in the Jewish culture, that some things are for God to know. And so what we know, he reveals to us. What we don't know, we don't need to know. I say that it's on a need-to-know basis. If you need to know it, he will tell you. Otherwise, not to worry. At some point in my life, this would have been very disturbing to me because I felt like I needed to be able to explain everything to everyone, especially to myself. But as I've gotten older and I've gotten to know the Lord more and more and trust Him more and more, I don't have to know everything. I can accept the things that I don't understand and that I don't know because I trust Him and I trust in Him. Now, this is not obviously the greatest apologetics ministry here when we say we just have some things we don't understand, but I think the bottom line is God is in charge, and if we needed to know, someone would have figured it out by now. And we don't know, and that's okay. So that's point number one, and that's a pretty long way of saying that. Point number two is this, and here's part of the not understanding. Sometimes we don't understand the nature of suffering. Why do people have to suffer? This falls into that category of, God, I don't understand. But if I needed to know, you would let me know. Now, sometimes when we see suffering in other people or in ourselves, we can point to some sort of redemption of it. We can say, oh, that was a very difficult time, but from that time I learned a great thing, or my faith was strengthened, or when this bad thing happened, some other good thing happened, and I could see God's hand at work, and it was so wonderful that out of something bad came something good. Well, that doesn't always happen. There are sufferings and difficulties in this life that we can't explain. And trying to do it is like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. Now, not everything falls into this category. Thankfully, the Lord knows we need, being feeble-minded, finite beings, we need the encouragement of seeing the silver lining around the dark cloud. But there are other times when He does not give us those answers. And in the same way that these theologians say, we don't know. It takes faith to go through a situation that you can't see any good out of and be able to say, I don't know, but I trust that God does, and I'm thankful that He is bigger than me. And so she says, this part can be a stumbling block, this idea. Christ suffered once for sins, the just for the unjust, that He might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive by the Spirit. Now, being the recipients of this wonderful gift, it's a lot easier to accept, saying, wow, He died for me. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that wonderful? I'm so thankful. But to really wrap your mind around it, to think that Jesus deliberately, obediently, purposefully entered into this life of suffering that He lived, and this time of suffering at the end that can be unimaginable to us, it's really hard to wrap your mind around it. Why would He do that? Why would He? Well, because He embodies what love for God is. Love of God and love of others compelled Him to obey God. And so I guess that's the admonishment sometimes, or the encouragement to us, is when we have difficulty obeying God. And when we have difficulty maybe loving other people, maybe we have a difficulty that has been brought to us and we can't see any reason for it, or we're suffering for doing good. It seems completely crazy. Like Job's friends, why don't you just curse God and be done with it? Well, the alternative is to trust God and to know that He is good and He is powerful and He is wise. And we are not good, and we are not powerful, and we are not wise. And so, again, the unknowable requires faith. So I would say about this passage, for me, the bottom line is what we don't understand in this life or in the Bible, we can trust that God does, and that He's got a plan and He's working it out. And there is great comfort in that, whether you are suffering or just reading the Bible. God knows, and if we need to know, He will reveal it to us. And if He doesn't reveal it to us, then we don't need to worry about it. And isn't that encouraging to know that we have somebody bigger and better than us taking care of things? So Have a great weekend and keep that in your heart and mind. God's got it all under control, even at the times when we feel like we don't. Thank you.